Today's class is called Full Body Flow. We're going to be working most of our biggest mover muscles, including the glutes, moving our hips, our shoulder blades, and our pelvis. We're going to start on our back with our 360 breath. So you can always have a yoga block nearby if you'd like to use that at any point. We're going to have the feet on the mat, the knees bent. Checking in with your triple S, feeling the back of your skull, your shoulder blades, your scapula, and your sacrum on the mat. If it feels okay, let your hands rest on the front of your ribs. Eyes will close. Start by taking a few deep breaths of any kind, just settling into this position. See if you feel any movement underneath your hands. Moving into our 360 breath, as you inhale, work on feeling the rib cage expand in all directions, front, side, and back. As you exhale, try to empty the breath and imagine your front ribs knitting in as you exhale. Inhale, feel the whole rib cage expand. Exhale, let it all the way out. Imagine those front ribs knitting in together. One more big breath here. Feel the ribs expand underneath your hands. Exhale it all the way out. You can open your eyes if they were closed. Hands can rest on your thighs or maybe on your pelvic points, the bony parts right at the front of your hips. Whatever feels the most comfortable. Just make sure that you're keeping the back of the skull and the shoulder blades on the mat, pressing into your feet. We're going to do some pelvic tilts here. So if you've never done pelvic tilts before, it might look really small. So as you inhale, you're going to lift your tailbone up, like you're trying to lift your tailbone up toward the ceiling, pressing the feet, and then exhale. You're going to press the tailbone down and tip the pelvis forward. So it's going to look like the low back lifting off the mat. Inhale, tip the pelvis backwards so your tailbone is going to start lifting up toward the ceiling. Exhale, tip the pelvis forward. Feel that little arch in your low back, or feel the low back lift up. One more time. Press the sacrum down, lift the tailbone up, tipping the pelvis backwards. It's a posterior tilt. And then exhale, anterior, tip the pelvis. So tipping it forward as the low back lifts up. And then settle back into that neutral. So now we've kind of got that feeling and that mapping in the brain of tipping the pelvis forward, tipping the pelvis backwards so that we can really start to feel that neutral right in between. Hands will come to the thighs again or rest them at the pelvic points. Keep that feeling of your neutral pelvis as you press into the feet. Curl the tailbone up a little bit. Firm your glutes. So really start to squeeze those glutes. Hold that neutral pelvis as you barely lift the glutes off the mat. So we're staying in this low bridge, really charging up the glutes. So our glutes are one of our biggest mover muscles. So we really want to learn to engage those glutes for efficient movement. Feel your shoulder blades really weighing down on the mat so that you're not lifting them up and popping your ribs up toward the ceiling. Hold those shoulder blades down, really work the glutes, almost feeling like we're wrapping the glutes down towards your heels. Keep that squeeze in the glutes. You're going to slowly lower down, really descend as slowly as you can, starting at the upper back, holding that firmness in the glutes and that neutral pelvis all the way until the sacrum comes down. Once your sacrum comes down, interlace your hands behind your head, draw your elbows in. Make sure, again, that we're not tipping the pelvis forward here. That would look like the low back lifting off. And if we start to lift up, we won't be able to get into the deep core until the sacrum is down. Big inhale here. Exhale, curl up off your shoulder blades. Tuck your chin towards your throat. Imagine those front ribs knitting in. Inhale to lower. Exhale as you lift. Chin towards your throat. Draw those pelvic points in. Even think about lifting pubic bone to the belly button here. Turn your ribs 1 inch to the right. Try to stay off that right shoulder blade. Come back to center. Inhale to lower. Exhale as you lift. Chin towards your throat. Lean your head back into your hands without lowering onto your shoulder blades. Turn through the ribs 1 inch to the left. Try to keep this left shoulder blade off the ground. Come back to center. Inhale, lower. Exhale as you lift. Chin towards your throat. Really feel everything move down toward the sacrum. Belly button draws down. Hold that feeling as you turn 1 inch to the right, staying off that right shoulder blade. If you'd like, slice this left arm across. Hand comes back behind the head as you come back to center. Inhale to lower. Exhale as you lift. Chin towards your throat. Knit those front ribs in. Feel everything pull down into the sacrum. Keep that feeling as you turn through the ribs 1 inch to the left. Lift off that left scapula. Maybe slice this right arm across, but keep feeling the belly button draw down. Hand comes back behind the head as you come back to center. Inhale to lower. Release your arms. Make your way into a quadruped, coming onto hands and knees. We'll line up so that our shoulders are right over our wrist creases, hips right over the knees. Now we're going to focus on our triple S, or our neutral spine here. Lift the front of your throat up toward the ceiling. So we're not bringing the chin forward. The chin stays toward the throat, but we lift the front of the throat up so we don't drop the head down. Find your neutral pelvis here. So remember that feeling of tipping forward, back arches, and tipping backwards. Find that happy medium, that neutral pelvis, drawing those pelvic points in. Now right away, the core is going to start to work a little bit harder since we're weight bearing, but really find that wrapping in of the core. And we're going to press into the fingers, just lift the heels of the hands, and then carefully lower down without slamming. Lift the heels of the hands, press into the fingers. Carefully lower back down. You're going to do this at whatever pace feels good, but really work the core so that you can control that lower down without slamming, holding that triple S in place. You can imagine that broom behind your back. Would it touch your skull, scapula, and sacrum while you work the wrists? Keep drawing those pelvic points in, lifting pubic bone to the belly. Widen the knees as much as you'd like. We're going to sit the hips back for a child's pose. Walk your hands over toward the left corner. Maybe right palm crosses on top. If it feels comfortable, you can cross it even further than the left. We'll let the head relax. Feeling a nice stretch into the right side of the body. Feel that 360 breath. Walk the hands toward the right corner of the mat. Maybe left palm comes on top or crosses even further than the right hand if that feels good. Coming into that side stretch child's pose. Really imagine breathing all the way up into that left shoulder blade. Walk the hands back to center. Come back to that quadruped. Warming up with cat-cow. Move at any pace you'd like. As you move through cat-cow, you can feel the pelvis tip forward and back. So we initiate that whole movement in the spine with the pelvis. The spine attaches to the back of the pelvis at the sacrum. So that's where the movement starts, and it works its way all the way up the lumbar spine, the thoracic spine, and the cervical spine if you're moving the head and neck. Come back to that neutral position. Lift the front of your throat. Maybe try that action of energetically dialing the hands out and really feel that security around the shoulder blades. We're going to tuck the toes. And as you lift to downward dog, I don't want you to think about lifting up and back toward the back of the mat. I just want you to think about lifting straight up toward the ceiling. So we're going to tuck the toes, Lift the pelvis straight up. Try to keep your torso towards your thighs so the hips are in that flexed position. Weight will stay in your hands. Now, if you feel like you can't lift anymore, walk your feet forward, bend the knees. We really want to bend the knees, free up a lot of tissue and fascia that connects from the heels, up the back of the legs, and all the way up the back to the shoulders. So let those knees bend. Feel free to move the head around, yes and no, if that feels good, to release any tension in the neck. Lift your front ribs up toward the back of your ribs so that we don't let the chest sink between the hands. We don't want anything feeling like it's sinking or dropping or really stretchy here. We want to feel secure and stable and strong while we lift those hip creases up, draw the pelvic points in, lift the pubic bone to the belly. Now you can stay here or you can pedal one foot out at a time. Or you can lift both heels, lift and lowering the heels without letting the chest drop. So keep that upward lift of the front ribs toward the back of your body, pressing into the hands. So we're really just focusing on the ankles and the calves here. Coming into our happy squat, bend your knees. Try to keep that connection between the torso and the thigh as you walk the hands back. So your heels will eventually lower, coming into this triple flexion of the ankles, knees, and hips without collapsing or dropping here. So keep that feeling of the broom behind your back. Really charge up those glutes. Rise to stand with a long spine, and we'll walk to the top of the mat. Really feel that stacking of your triple S. Keep that connection of the broom behind your back as you reach your arms forward and up. Shoulder blades are going to glide up into elevation without popping the ribs. So keep that feeling of knitting those front ribs together. Exhale, hinge at your hips. Find that same triple flexion, ankles, knees, and hips. Torso is going to come close to the thighs by bending the knees. Plant the hands down, step to a quadruped. Shoulders will line up right over your wrist creases. Again, find that neutral neck. Lift the front of the throat up toward the ceiling. Find your neutral pelvis, lifting the pubic bone up. This time we're going to keep the wrists down, but we'll press into the palms. As you press into the palms, protract your scapula. So we're broadening the shoulder blades, moving them away from each other. And then retract without bending your elbows. Try to squeeze your shoulder blades in toward each other without tipping the pelvis. So hold that neutral pelvis. Protract, press into the palms. Feel the shoulder blades spread apart. And then retract, squeeze those shoulder blades in, holding that connection of your triple S stacking. Protract, feel the shoulder blades spread apart, broadening the upper back. Retract, so we're trying not to move anything else. It's not a cat-cow. It's just the shoulder blades moving apart and together. They're protracting and retracting, but we're keeping that neutral position of the neck, neutral position of the pelvis, and the core is staying engaged. From here, tuck your toes. Think about lifting the pelvis straight up, not up and back. Walk the feet up as much as you need to keep that upward lift into the pelvis. Let the knees bend without straightening your legs. Lift your hip creases. Lift the front ribs up toward the back of the body. Can you feel that hip flexion here? The connection between the torso to thigh without tipping the pelvis forward. So we don't want to arch the back. Maybe add some of those heel lifts here. Even if your knees are bent and your heels are already off the mat, you can still press into those big toes and just lift the heels a little bit more. But keep that connection of the hands into the floor. So we're not letting any weight shift out of the hands. The hands are taking the weight the whole time using the core. This time we'll bend the knees. Think about flexing at the hips as you walk the feet up toward the hands. Hinge at your hips. Hip creases move back. Charge up those glutes as you reach the arms forward and up. Shoulder blades glide up into elevation without the ribs flaring. Exhale, torso towards your thigh. Shoulders right over your wrist creases as you step to plank. Check that neutral position from the head to the pelvis. Find your neutral shoulder blade, not protracting, not retracting, but somewhere on the back of the ribs. Wrap your glutes down towards your heels. Lower your knees without any feeling of dropping or sinking. Exhale, lower the rest of the way in one piece. Notice where your shoulders end up. So we want to keep the head of the arm bones or the top of the humerus away from the ground. We'll take a wide fingertip cobra. Come onto your fingertips. Take the hands wider than the mat. Forehead will come down. You're going to press your pubic bone down. So that's a great way to really feel that neutral pelvis so that we don't arch the back here, tipping the pelvis forward. We'll press the pubic bone down. Imagine the belly button lifting up. Really charge up those glutes as you squeeze the shoulder blades together and down the back. So they're retracting and moving into a little bit of depression as they glide down. Keep that lift in the low belly. Hands come back under your shoulders. Lift to quadruped. From your quadruped, step your right foot through. Left knee will stay down into our 90-90 lunge. Check that neutral pelvis here. Draw those pelvic points in. Zipper the pubic bone up. Arms are going to reach forward and up. Again, without flaring the ribs. Knit those front ribs in. Firm that left glute. We're going to lift and lower the shoulder blades. So our scapula, again, are gliding up and down, but we don't want anything else to be doing the moving. So it's not the ribs moving. Everything's holding still, and we're just trying to feel the shoulder blades move. Up and down. Almost like we're shrugging our shoulders up and down, but holding the core really active. Lower the hands down. Shoulders over your wrist. Right leg will slide back for three-legged quadruped. Just like a plank pose, find that neutral neck. Lift the front of the throat. Neutral shoulder blade. Neutral pelvis. Lift up that right leg, not high because we don't want to tip the pelvis. Zipper up. Bend your knee and flex your foot. If you're feeling this in the right knee, zipper the pubic bone up. Find a more neutral pelvis and then lower the knee down a little bit. So we shouldn't feel discomfort in the knee here. As you inhale, you're going to externally rotate that right hip. So your right knee will move out to the side a little bit, but we're not turning the whole pelvis. The back of the pelvis stays level. And then internally rotate the hip. The right knee will come in a little bit toward the left. Externally rotate, knee moves out without the pelvis moving. Internally rotate, lift the front of your throat. Externally rotate, lift the pubic bone to the belly. Internally rotate, press evenly into the hands. Lower that right knee down. Left foot steps through, low lunge. Find that 90-90 setup. Zipper the pubic bone up. Draw those pelvic points in. Think about that broom touching your triple S. Arms reach up without the ribs flaring. So maybe they're a little bit more diagonal so we can keep that feeling of knitting those front ribs in. Shoulder blades are going to glide up and down. Move at any pace you want. You can move as slowly as you'd like. It might take a little bit more focus and awareness by really trying to just focus on the shoulder blades doing the moving without compensating anywhere else. Lower your hands down, shoulders right over your wrist creases. Left leg extends back. Find that neutral spine, that triple S stacking. Zipper the pubic bone up. Bend the left knee and flex the foot. Now again, if you're feeling anything in the left knee, lower the knee down and find a more neutral pelvis. Zip it up. It's probably tipping forward a little bit. Externally rotate that left hip. Don't let any change happen in the sacrum at the back of the pelvis. Internally rotate. Externally rotate. Draw those pelvic points in. Internally rotate. Lift the front of your throat. Externally rotate. Internally rotate. Step that left knee down. Take any option. You can take cat-cow, child's pose, or downward dog. Check in with your 360 breath. Feel the rib cage expand in all directions as you inhale. Let it out either through your nose or your mouth, whatever feels better. Bend your knees, walk your feet forward, hinge at your hips. Really use your glutes, press into the feet, rise to stand. Shoulder blades glide up into elevation, knit those front ribs in. Exhale, hinge, find that triple flexion. Plant the hands down, shoulders right over your wrist creases. Find that neutral spine here. If you were standing up, would your head be over your shoulders, over your pelvis? Squeeze those glutes as you lower the knees. Zipper up the pubic bone. Hold that feeling as you exhale. Lower down, keeping the shoulder blades on the back of your ribs. Head will come down, wide fingertip cobra. Elbows are up. You're going to draw the shoulder blades together and down the back. As you squeeze those shoulder blades in, make sure your pelvis is neutral by pressing that pubic bone down, squeezing the glutes, lifting the low belly. Hands come under your shoulders, lift to quadruped. Right foot steps through, tuck the left toes, lift up, check that neutral pelvis. Think about that stacking of the back of the skull, right over the scapula, over the sacrum. Bring your right hand to the back of the pelvis at the sacrum. Left arm will reach up. Make a fist with that left hand. Glide that left scapula up. So it's almost like we're trying to lift the whole left side of the body up toward the ceiling, as if we could lift up off that left knee. Still stretching the front of that left hip, really wrapping that left glute down toward the heel. Lower the hands. Step back to quadruped. Slide your right toes back in a three-legged quadruped without tipping the pelvis. So really hold that neutral spine. We're going to barely lift those right toes up. And again, if you tend to feel this in the knee, really find a more neutral pelvis, lifting the pubic bone up and lower the foot down a little bit more. The goal is to hold this triple S in place as you flex the right hip, bringing the thigh any amount toward the torso without tipping the pelvis, without rounding the back or dropping the head. And then reach it back out so that right hip is extending. Now flex it without changing the spine or the pelvis. Thigh comes to the torso any amount. Reach it back, extend that right hip. One more. Flex the right hip without rounding. Lift the front of the throat. Extend it out. Now bend the knee and bring it down, hovering off the mat. And we'll circle this right hip both directions, so clockwise and counterclockwise. Hold that core strong. Release it down. Left foot steps through. Tuck the right toes. Lift up for that low lunge. Check the stacking of the back of your skull, shoulder blades, and sacrum. Bring your left hand to the sacrum, right arm up. Make a fist with that right hand. Now really reach that right fist up by reaching that right shoulder blade up, but keep lifting the pubic bone up. So everything on that right side is lifting up. You could even imagine that right thigh bone lifting up into the hip, so we can lift a little bit of weight out of that right knee. Lower the hands down. Quadruped. Check in with your neutral spine. Slide the left toes back without tipping the pelvis. Barely lift those left toes up, and we'll flex the left hip. Thigh comes toward the torso without anything changing in the posture. Reach it back out so that left hip extends. Now the left hip flexes without anything changing. Extend it back out. Lift the front of your throat. Flex the left hip, thigh toward the torso. Extend it out, press evenly into the hands. Bend that left knee, hover it above the ground, and circle that left hip. Both directions, but we don't want the pelvis moving, so try to limit any movement side to side in the pelvis. It's just that left hip moving. Release it down. Either take child's pose, cat-cow, or downward dog. Checking in with your breath. If you're in down dog, lift those hip creases, draw those pelvic points in, lift the front ribs up toward the back body. Walk your feet forward, find that triple flexion of the ankles, knees, and hips. Really use your glutes as you reach the arms forward and up. Exhale the arms down. From the top of your mat, step your right foot back into a high lunge. You don't need to step the right foot back very far. We're going to bend both knees so that we have this upright pelvic bowl. So we're not going to have it tipping forward. We really want to lift the pubic bone up, knit those front ribs in as we reach the arms up. Hold the lower body still as we swing this right arm down and back. You can start to turn the ribs a little bit, but don't let the pelvis move, and then reach it back up. Left arm will swing down and back any amount. Reach it back up. Do this alternating, whatever pace feels good. The faster you go, the harder it will be to stabilize the lower body. So just move at whatever pace feels right today, really working on that core stability, the glutes working, the pelvis staying neutral as we move the arms and maybe turn through the thoracic spine, turning at the ribs a little bit. Bring both arms up. We're going to lower the arms, turn to the side of the mat for a squat, externally rotating the hips so our toes will turn out any amount without forcing that turnout. We should feel like we could be here for a while in this squat, lifting the pubic bone up. So we don't want to be dropping anything out of that triple S alignment. Fingertips will come to the head of the humerus and we'll roll the shoulders backwards. Rolling one shoulder at a time. Again, you can move the ribs a little bit side to side, but don't let any movement happen in the lower body. Keep those glutes really dialed up. Straighten the legs, step it back to the top of the mat. Left foot steps back, high lunge. Doesn't need to step back very far. Check in with that upright pelvis, that feeling of the broom behind your back. Reach the arms up. Knit those front ribs in. Left arm swings back. Right arm swings back. Alternate at any pace. The ribs can turn a little bit side to side, so it's a little bit of thoracic rotation, but we don't want the ribs to pop. So we really want that feeling of kind of corseting around the ribs. Keeping the core engaged, drawing those two pelvic points in. Really firming the glutes. Both arms up. Release them down, turn to the side of the mat, find that squat. Hips are externally rotated to whatever degree feels comfortable. Zipping the pubic bone up, knitting those front ribs in. Fingertips to the head of the humerus, roll back one at a time. So we always want to roll back so that we can open the front of the chest and shoulders that tend to be pretty chronically tight from rounding our shoulders forward. So really work on rolling back and feel that stretch or opening at the front of the chest. Good, straighten your legs, release it down, step back to the top of the mat. Right foot will step back for warrior two. Just like that high lunge, you don't need to step your right foot back very far. We really want to be able to hold that pelvic bowl upright, and if we're too wide, we're really going to want to tip forward. So shorten your stance. Focus on the glutes really firming, the legs staying strong, those pelvic points drawing in. Arms are going to reach out to the side. Imagine your lower body locked into place. So think about where your pelvis is, think about where your legs are. Try not to let them move as we reverse it. So don't let the pelvis or the knee move forward or back. Hold everything here. As you reverse it, right hand comes down, left fingertips reach up or up and toward the back of the mat. So we get this nice stretch along that left shoulder blade, left lat, left shoulder. Zip that pubic bone up. Back to warrior two. Now again, we're not going to move the pelvis to get down low. We're going to hold that neutral pelvis. Left forearm toward the thigh. It might be at the hip. Back arm comes up and over. And again, we want to reach those right fingertips up toward the front of the mat, getting that same stretch along the right scapula, knitting those front ribs in. Warrior two. Reverse. Let the head release. Feel that lengthening into the left side body. Firm that right glute. Warrior two. Forearm toward the thigh without the pelvis moving. Reach those right fingertips up. Lift the pubic bone up. Back to warrior two. Straighten that left leg. Parallel the feet facing the side of the mat. Hands will come to your hip creases right where the thigh meets the pelvis. Side lunge to the right. So your right hip crease will move back so that your right knee is just about over the ankle, not further than the toes. Side lunge to the left. Check in with that feeling of lifting the front of the throat, imagining that broom behind your back. Keep alternating with your side lunges. So we're going for a little stretch or pull, some kind of sensation on the inside of the straight leg, stretching the adductors or the inner thighs. Hold that feeling of the broom behind your back. Come back up to standing, step it back to the top of your mat. Left foot steps back, warrior two. Shorten the stance a little bit. If we're too wide, we're gonna have a really hard time focusing on the strength aspect of it. So we really wanna zipper that pubic bone up. Imagine wrapping your glutes down toward the heels, arms reach out. So again, we don't wanna let the pelvis do the moving here. We're really just thinking about the ribs, side bending, side to side here. That's the only thing that's gonna move besides the arms. We'll reverse it. Right arm comes up and over. So the pelvis hasn't moved. I'm just reaching these right fingertips back, getting a great stretch along the right side of the body. Back to warrior two. Don't let the pelvis move. Bring the forearm to the thigh, left arm up and over. Let the head release. Reach those left fingertips as far as you can. Feel that left scapula glide up. Warrior two. Reverse. Let the head release. Knit those front ribs in. Lift the pubic bone up. Warrior two. Variation, forearm to the thigh, back arm up and over. Firm that left glute, draw those pelvic points in. Back to warrior two. Straighten, turn toward the side of the mat, parallel the feet. Keep that feeling of the broom behind your back as you bend the left knee. We don't want the left knee moving forward. We want that left hip crease moving back. Pelvis stays neutral, so really think about lifting the pubic bone up toward the belly. And then side lunge to the right. So as we do these lateral lunges, our hips are moving side to side, but the pelvis doesn't turn with it. So the pelvis holds that neutral position, which means we're still using a lot of strength here. We're using the strength of the glutes, the core, and everything that helps to keep us with this neutral posture while we move. Come back up to the top of the mat. We're gonna do a little bit of balancing mixed with strength. So we're gonna start in our chair pose. Feet on the mat, checking that triple S. Hinge at the hips again. So it's just like when we hinge and forward fold. So we're not gonna bend the knees forward. Our hips are gonna move back, torso toward the thigh without tipping the pelvis. So if there's any arch or rounding in the back, lift the pubic bone up toward the belly. Find that neutral pelvis. Hands can stay somewhere on the pelvis or the body, or you can bring the hands to the heart, thumbs right on the sternum. And we're gonna straighten the legs, press into the big toes, lift the heels, lower with control. Flex your right hip, so we're gonna pick up that right foot. Really wrap that left glute down, step the foot down. Hinge at your hips, sit the hips and the glutes back for that chair. Don't let the toes lift. Straighten, use your glutes. Press into the big toes, lift the heels. Lower the heels with control. Flex the left hip, picking up the left foot any amount without the pelvis or spine changing. Step it down. Chair, hinge at the hips. Kick those glutes on. Straighten the legs. Press into the big toes, lift your heels. Lower down, imagine that broom behind your back. Flex that right hip. Squeeze that left glute, step it down. Hinge, chair pose. Think about the broom, press into the feet. Rise up, use the glutes. Lift the pubic bone up, lift the heels. Lower down, flex the left hip. Squeeze that right glute, step it down. Chair, hinge at the hips, torso toward the thigh. Press into the toes. Rise up, big toes press, lift the heels, lower down, flex the right hip, pause, Firm this left glute. We're gonna abduct and externally rotate that right hip a little bit. Plant it for tree wherever it lands. Lift the pubic bone up. Make sure there's no arch in the low back. Really keep firing this left glute. Gazing somewhere in front of you. Check in with that 360 breath. Step it down. Chair, long spine as you hinge at the hips. Use your glutes, press into the feet to lift. Press into the big toes, lift the heels. Lower with control. Firm that right glute as you flex the left hip. Hold that neutral pelvis as you abduct and a little bit of external rotation for that left hip. Plant it for tree. Imagine that broom behind your back. Zipper that pubic bone up. Keep squeezing that right glute. Release it down. Roll the shoulders back one at a time. Make any movements or wiggles you want to get out, and we'll head back to the mat. Coming onto the ground. Checking in with that triple S, back of the skull, shoulder blades, sacrum on the mat. We're going to pick up the left foot, so flex that left hip, flex the ankle or the foot, pulling the toes back toward the shin. Externally rotate that left hip. Cross it over the right thigh. So we're in that figure 4 position, but make sure we haven't lifted the sacrum up. So really weight down into the sacrum. Feel everything kind of pull down into the sacrum. You can stay here or you can pick up your right foot. We won't interlace the hands behind the right thigh. That will make it a passive stretch. So if you want to go deeper into this active stretch, you're going to continue to flex that right hip to whatever degree you can. So that just means your right thigh is going to start coming closer and closer toward the torso, and really notice the sensation on that left hip as you flex your right hip a little bit more. And you can keep going into this stretch by actively using your right glute, by actively using your left glute to move that left knee away from you even more. We're going to make a fist. Make 2 fists, reach them up toward the ceiling, and just circle your wrist while you're here. Checking that the shoulder blades are still down on the ground. Release everything down, and we'll switch. Check that triple S, back of the skull, shoulder blades and sacrum. Flex the right hip, externally rotate, cross it over the left thigh. Now really dorsiflex the right foot, pulling the right toes back toward the shin. Make sure we haven't tipped the pelvis here. Draw those pelvic points in. Maybe pick up that left foot. So again, if you want to feel more of a stretch in that outer right hip, you're going to continue to flex this left hip, bringing the torso toward the thigh or thigh toward the torso, keeping that triple S down. If you still want to feel more of a stretch, we're going to actively use this right glute and right hip to open, like we're trying to press that right knee away from us without using our hands. Make 2 fists, reach them up toward the ceiling, circle your fists in both directions. And a little bit of multitasking here as we warm down. Keeping the shoulder blades down, the sacrum down. Release everything down. We'll keep the knees bent. Roll onto your left side. So we're going to keep that long spine. We're not going to curl up or hunch up yet. Our left arm will reach out, palm up. Right palm starts on top. Let the head rest down in whatever way feels good. Hold that neutral pelvis by lifting the pubic bone up. We're going to reach this right arm up and back without turning in the pelvis or the low back. So our right hip is going to stay over the left. If that feels like way too much sensation in the front of the right shoulder or right side of the chest, you're going to bend that right arm into a goalpost shape, and that should be a little bit more gentle. It might be too much of a pull with that long lever arm, so you can always bend the elbow. Keep that feeling of zipping the pubic bone up. If it feels good in the head and neck, you can gently move the head side to side, but only to the degree that feels comfortable. Undo the twist, roll back through center, roll to your right side. Now again, we want that feeling of the broom still behind our back, so we don't want to round. Right arm will reach out, palm up, left palm starts on top. Open the left arm up and back without anything turning in the sacrum. So we still have that feeling of drawing those pelvic points in If that feels like a little too much in the left shoulder, bend the left elbow. Feel that expansive breath in your ribs, even as you rotate in the thoracic spine. Maybe let the head rock side to side gently. Undo your twist. Roll back to center. Make any extra movements or stretches that might feel good. You can hug the knees in and rock around the sacrum. You can take a happy baby if you'd like. Whenever you feel relaxed and ready for Shavasana, make your way onto any comfortable position on your back. Feeling that triple S, so maybe feet stay on the mat or extend them out. Arms can rest somewhere on your body or along your sides. Let your eyes close. Relax your forehead. Wiggle your jaw around a little bit until it feels relaxed. Take a quick scan of your body from the top of your head down to your toes. Noticing any tension you might be holding on to. Visualize that you could let it go as you exhale. Take the biggest breath you've taken all day. Stay here in your Shavasana as long as you'd like.